And by the way, for those of you who don't know, I'm Chief Technology Officer here at xMatters. So I get to take the credit for all the hard work that Doug actually decides that goes into the product as well as that comes out of our engineering solution. So I've spent a lot of time out in the field talking to you guys about things. And today what I thought I'd do is I'd start things off with a little bit of a broader perspective on what we see as current trends in the mobile industry. So I'll cover that fairly briefly, and then we'll jump into specific applications on the xMatters side. So if we look across the mobile world today, there's certain things that are unchanged. There's a great friendly relationship in the marketplace with the dominant players, those being Android, iOS, and Windows Mobile as the dominant players. In that battle, other people get eaten alive, like Nokia, brands that were kind of thought of as dominating the industry just a few years ago with their operating systems. But that battle kind of continues, and it actually affects what we do in terms of our planning for what we're doing in the mobile space and how you should be looking at mobility in your organizations as well. So as an example, 2 years ago, if you'd said, hey, Android is going to be the dominant player in terms of market share for mobile, those are predictions. Those hadn't really come true yet because Android was still considered a little rough around the edges. That's really not the case anymore, right? You guys see the awesome TV ads with Android and Samsung phones that are like waterproof, which is fantastic for nights like last night, I think. And you also see Windows Mobile actually stepping up with lots of innovations of their own. What you don't see are companies like BlackBerry. So and it's kind of a scary concept when just 5, 6, 7 years ago, BlackBerry was it. They were kind of the dominant player by far. And now their kind of last bastion of market share is the federal government. And that's not really a healthy place to be, but that's kind of the reality. So those impact decisions that we make. They're also impacted by demographics. So when we look at when people bring in their own devices, how many of you know someone who, if they have to choose their own device, out of any device they possibly could, who would bring a BlackBerry phone into work? I don't see, the light's kind of bright, but I'm not seeing a lot of hands. And that's kind of reflected in what we do from a solution perspective as well. But there still are, to be fair, there's a lot of companies that still standardize on the platform. There's other trends that we're seeing as well, and this impacts in particular the developing world. So we're seeing the prices of mobile phones dropping significantly to the point where just last week, or maybe even earlier this week, it's been kind of a long week, the Firefox OS phones are planning on being started in the industry at the $25 price point. How many of you have employees in emerging markets? Quick show of hands. Okay, so those kind of trends come in when I talk to clients and they say, hey, what do we do with, it's great to have a lot of things that rely on smartphones, but what do we do in emerging markets? What do we do in developing countries? What about there when the price points really matter in terms of having the technology spread through? So those sorts of trends also drive those elements in there. At the same time, we're actually seeing phones get more and more technology embedded directly within there. So I carry an iPhone, and for basic fitness tracking stuff, I actually don't need a wearable because I've got a motion sensor in my phone. It'll track steps, distances. It actually has a dedicated M7 chip which tracks that sort of activity. Those enable different sort of applications and constructs to exist within the application world. We're also seeing kind of a constellation of devices that rely on the smartphone as a primary device. So they're talking about things like runkeeper applications or wearables, devices you attach to a bike when you're going for a ride, or smartwatches. Those are all things that the phone itself is now becoming a hub for other information. So that creates different market opportunities too. We're also seeing kind of Moore's Law at work, where you can do things like real-time translations with your phone just by pointing at stuff. So how many of you have heard of an app called WordLens? Quick show of hands. Not a lot. So that's actually a company that Google acquired earlier this week. I think it was this week. Again, long week. But they have a really cool technology where for a set of languages, you can literally point it at a sign, and it's not like you type it in and do it. It'll actually do it in exactly its form. Road signs, street signs when you're traveling, and actually do things like immediate translations. Those things become really important as well when you're able to go through and actually have not just translations occur, but actions take place. So in real time, you point it at stuff, you get augmented views, additional data. That can be very helpful in all sorts of conditions, whether you're talking marketing, emergency management, or anything else. The other trends that we're, of course, seeing is a continuing consumerization of technology, and in particular, within the mobile world, it's kind of manifests itself in a really interesting way. So I use my phone for everything, right? It's basically the thing that wakes me up in the morning, literally, because I don't have an alarm clock. It's my phone. It's the last thing that I look at when I go to sleep at night, right? And that's usually an email that I'm checking out late at night. And you also have everything in the middle. I'm looking for a place to eat. I'm checking into a location. I am, looking up some information about something. I'm searching for data, trying to win a bar bet. Whatever the situation may be, that's kind of really the tool that I go to. Now, that's in my personal life. Now, think about what we do in our professional lives. Do you really? So if I'm doing kind of my day-to-day thing, I really don't actually even need a computer for the most part. I can do just about everything I need to: get information, take action, communicate directly from my mobile device. How would you guys, how many of you think that you'd be able to function in your professional lives during the entire day with no access to a laptop? It's purely on your mobile devices, looking for information, making stuff happen. How many of you think you could actually pull it off? I see a couple, but not many. And it's because we actually have still a lot of barriers to taking advantage of the same power we see in our personal lives in the workplace. And that's something that we really should kind of talk about. Now, I can cover this as a broad topic, but I'm not going to feign expertise in every possible area of using mobile apps in the workplace. However, there is kind of an area of expertise that I can talk about, and that's communication. That's kind of what xMatters does. So if you look across progression of communication technologies over time, and I thought we'd actually walk through this whole chart all the way from cave paintings to moving forward, so hopefully everyone has a couple hours that we can walk through that. But suffice to say, communication has changed significantly over time with major shifts in technology. And today, if we look at communication very specifically in our mobile app, we actually form a whole set of different options for communications. This is actually similar to the setup that I have on my phone. I have different communities that I communicate with tied to different applications. So if I'm using iMessages, that obviously limits it to iOS folks. I use Skype for international communication. Line, I use for people in Asia who I know, right? That's a very common application to use there as well. There's things like Viber, LinkedIn, et cetera. They all form their individual communities and specialized communication sets who I can take advantage of. Now, there is another app that's not on that screen, and that's the xMatters app. So you saw a little bit of this in action in Doug's presentations yesterday talking about what we do. However, there's some stuff I want to go into more detail on the mobile side. So just to kind of set the stage, the mobile apps that we produce, just to give you an idea of the iteration and the pace, we've done over 20 releases across our mobile app portfolio in the last 12 months. So that's a very rapid set of changes, and that's really the pace at which mobile moves. We have no plans of slowing down, because that's really what it takes to keep pace with the things that help you guys out when you're using our mobile capabilities. And those cover all sorts of different areas. So it's not like we've never had the ability to communicate to someone on a smartphone before. We've always had the ability to reach out, to send important messages through telephone calls, to send out email alerts, to go out and actually send text messages. Those have all been channels that have always been available to xMatters on smart devices. So why did we actually go out and build a mobile app to begin with? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, SMS, if you look kind of prioritization, you want something that gets your attention, so it kind of has a quick pop-up. It interrupts your workflow, but a phone call is too disruptive. You have to actually pick it up, answer it, figure out what's going on. It's not something you can just quickly glance at and get a sense of priority. Emails, well, we get way too many emails, right? I've never heard of anyone saying that, hey, I'd love more email. In fact, there's a little bit too much noise on that channel, so we want something that's a little different. Texting seems to be a pretty good solution and works very well globally. The problem with that is there is a cost associated with it, for one. And two, you don't always get global reliability or deliverability. It varies based on what's happening. Countries can choose to turn it on and off as they see fit. And there's actually very little recourse for anyone who's using it as a background channel. It's also not particularly secure, right? So you kind of it's passing through public infrastructure. It's entirely out of your control. So it's really some of the reasons why we introduced the mobile app. It gives you the good things out of SMS, which is interrupt-driven, gets your attention. You saw in the demonstration from Doug yesterday with a weather alert right in the middle of his presentation. It certainly got his attention, right, and everyone else is in the room. So we get to see that as it takes place. It also gives you the richness of email or any other very richly formatted approach where you can actually get content displayed to you, and you can take actions directly from there as well, so you get the two-way benefits. So it really represents the best of all worlds, in our view, about delivering messages reliably. So that's really why we actually went about building the mobile app. Now, delivery endpoint is pretty good, but there's more that we can do with mobile devices. In fact, one of the really cool things that we started to do with our mobile apps over the last year or so has really been the ability to take tailored designs for communication workflows and publish them to mobile devices. So if you happen to be in IT and you're a major incident manager, you have a very specific set of checklist tasks that you go through before you send out the initial alert. So that might include things like what line of business is impacted. Is it customer visible? Are we actually down, or just have we failed over successfully to our backup and no one knows? We're just trying to restore services for resiliency purposes. How do we actually go about and build those workflows together? That's something that's very different than, let's say, if I'm working in a hospital and I'd like to communicate and have a doctor who wants to reach out and actually get a cardio consult. Those don't really have much in common. Now, there are certain things that you might need for a major incident, like an actual team to respond, if specialists come in and take a look at it, a little bit different than what you're dealing with at a hospital, right? So they need their own distinct communication workflows. So the mobile app actually has to adjust to the needs of the user, right? It could be and this could be someone in IT on the healthcare side, someone working in the actual hospital, or maybe you want to have someone who's looking at notifying people for bad weather, like a tornado or coming, or a major, like a Hurricane Sandy or something like that. Those communication requirements vary. And if you look across your business, any one of you, if you looked and said, what are the communication needs of any different part of our organization, that would change over time and would change within each perspective you look at it. You might have a different message structure for a manager to initiate versus someone else. The other thing that mobile makes available, and this is particularly made possible by the spread of large-scale mobile technology to everyone, is that we really shouldn't think of it as just an endpoint to deliver messages. So it's not enough to tell someone, hey, there's bad weather approaching one of our corporate campuses, and you should take shelter in place. Right? Those sorts of things are one way. They might be able to come back to you and say, hey, I'm okay, or I'm in a sheltered place, but it's you delivering information to them and them just kind of giving you feedback. What if we turn it the other way around? There's no rule that says it has to be in the direction of kind of a top-down approach. You can go bottom-up. Imagine it this way. You have a major event that takes place for your organization, bad weather, natural disaster, whatever the case may be, and you want information from the people who you normally send messages to. Why not use the same approach and give the mobile app to people to send information out? Now, this is something you have to keep under control to some extent because you don't want anyone sending messages to anybody else. But what if you actually took away the ability for them to designate who sends the message? So in this view, hopefully you can see it at the back, you notice I'm specifying a condition, so DC, tornado, and I've got some additional comments in there as well. The one thing you won't see is specifying a sender. In fact, in this workflow, there is no place to go back and say, hey, here's the person I want to send the message to. One of the things you can do with the mobile apps and the workflows we built into the system is to take advantage of some of the subscription stuff that you heard about yesterday as well, where you put a message out there with the content and let the system figure out who the right person is to deliver the message to. And of course, you can include rich content in there as well. So if you look out your window and you see sharks floating by, that could be a problem. And no one's going to believe you unless you have a picture of it. Of course, you want to afterwards go through and take that picture, apply a nice Instagram picture, post it on Instagram to get as many likes as you can. That's a secondary task, right? And you can do that as well. That's the advantage of having everyone doing it for work. It's a really cool way to make a lot of friends. By the way, if you haven't seen this movie, it's awesome. It's called Sharknado. Best movie ever. Totally recommend it. It'd be good to see yesterday at about 2 in the morning. That'd be actually the best time to enjoy a movie like that. And those are some of the capabilities we've put into the mobile app itself. Now, the way that's made possible, and I think Doug walked through some of these things, so I won't belabor the point, but one of the things that really makes this possible for anyone in your organization to do, and it's not something that you need to have a developer assigned or anything like that, it's something any of your business analysts can actually run through as well. And that's the idea of having design tools that let you take those communication workflows that you kind of scribble out on paper and process and actually turn them into web and mobile applications. And those are some of the design tools that we walked through very quickly yesterday, where you lay out the structure. So all the forms that you saw in the mobile app, what information, what are the task checklist, All those things can be put in directly into the design tools. You go through and you structure out the message content. What do you want it to look like in a push message to any given device or in an email? You lay it out, graphics. You can just load up the raw HTML if you so desire as well. Put all that information in. Decide how you'd like the voice alerts to work as well. So entirely different, right? What I want to say in an email or a push message looks absolutely nothing like what I would say on a phone call, right? I certainly don't want to be sitting in an IT example, for example, if I'm actually listening on the phone and someone's reading to me a host name and an IP address, I would probably hang up the call. It would drive me insane, right, after the very first message. So the content adjusts to what you need it to. And of course, the responses. What are the responses you want to have to any given workflow that you set up in there? And that's where we're defining within the environment, no coding at all, and then you've actually gone ahead and published your application. That's really what it takes to go out there and make it happen. Now, putting all those pieces together, you're able to actually get a combined view across all these different views, across all these different services, and put it all together all in one place. So you can do everything from launching your application, selecting a specific workflow, firing it off, having it send out the messages to all the places you need it to, soliciting back responses, and if you happen to be the initiator of an emergency communication or a communication to get some help from someone, send information out, you also can actually get a state of what's happening. So you can actually run through your entire communication exercise entirely on your phone. That's very powerful to be able to do for any of us in our professional lives, and certainly not something that we do that we do enough of. We still kind of rely on, I have to be at my desk to make these things happen. I've got to go into the data center and make those things take place. This is an approach where you're able to actually take those actions from wherever you happen to be. Now, that's kind of a quick example. We have 30 minutes today, so I don't want to kind of go through too much detail. Grab me afterwards if you'd like to talk through it. But that's just not sitting on our laurels, right? So I mentioned we've done 20 different mobile application releases across the last 12 months, but there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot of really cool technology and changes that we've seen in the industry that we want to take advantage of. Now, this is not a roadmap, so to be perfectly clear, and so Doug doesn't stab me after as I'm trying to walk out the room later. But this kind of represents some of the things that we consider as shifts in the marketplace that go into our mobile planning, as an example. Those include things like taking advantage of technologies like Google Glass, right? So are there interesting things that we could do in there? You saw the example earlier of translations, having pop-up information take place, submitting real-time video or picture content as part of giving you your situational awareness of what's taking place. Those are all things that should be possible. Still new, who knows, might entirely flop, right? It's still at the $1,500 mark, which is a little pricey for a Christmas present, but it's still a possibility of something to come back and take a look at it as something that takes off in the marketplace. We're also seeing continuing progression and improvement of mobile sensors and wearables, right? So that's a really interesting area to go ahead and take a look at, where the wearables are actually getting really, really smart to have full spatial recognition. So in fact, there's one called the Atlas. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. There's actually a cool one that's supposed to come out later this year, and it can tell a difference between you walking upstairs, doing a push-up, running, skipping. It essentially has full awareness, can actually use the sensors to tell you exactly what you're doing. Imagine if you work in a manufacturing facility and you have your workers kind of have something like that in their environments. You can actually track what's happening not just on the factory line, things that are sensors, but directly what's happening with people. So you can tell the pace of what's happening within your environment. Say, look, our packing group seems to be slowing down a little bit. And I can tell from the motions what their actual rate of operations is. Those sort of activities can drive other communication to help you improve your manufacturing, bring additional shift workers in. Hey, the guys are slowing down. We should have an early break. All those sorts of elements drive new behavior. And those are things that we'll be able to take advantage of over time. There's also location services. You'll note one thing I didn't talk about is real-time location stuff in our applications today. There's certainly lots of cool stuff we can do there. It's also a gigantic, mess of privacy information and privacy laws to actually go through. But we see lots of opportunity to do cool stuff with mobile pieces, and in particular for enterprises. One of the things that actually we think makes it potentially easier to deal with long term is micro-location services. Maybe you've heard of a technology called iBeacons. Okay, at least a couple of hands. So it's really kind of cool tech. If you have an iOS device that you bought in the last 2 years, sitting in here as a secret subset device that no one knows it's capable of doing apparently, is an iBeacon. What an iBeacon is, it's a micro-location device. And what it's able to do is actually tell a difference between me standing right here So if you assume that's a beacon and I have another phone in my pocket, it'll know the difference between me walking up on stage and getting closer to it. It actually is able to range using multiple devices. Now, it's really cool because you're able to go through and narrow down, let's say for emergency purposes, you implant iBeacons in your office, you'd be able to tell where your employees are directly. Not just kind of GPS locations like they're in this block or in this building, what floor, what part of the floor are they on? And you may choose to notify people based on specific locations. If I have a field tech out in an office and there's someone who needs help 2 doors down, I don't have to find out, well, there's 5 guys at that office. That one person is the closest person. I can choose to communicate just to them. It improves targeting. It improves efficiency. There's lots of cool stuff we can take advantage of there, not to mention all the marketing future opportunities as well. Those are the types of technologies that we look at in the marketplace to see how mature are they? Are we ready to adopt them? Which customers would be good examples to run through? Those are the types of elements that we keep track of when we're looking at mobile roadmap sorts of elements within our framework. Now, this is the first presentation in the morning, so I'm not going to go long. I figured if you guys have questions, I won't take them here. We can look for me afterwards. I know someone at some point is going to come back and say, hey, I don't really have a question for you, but has anyone ever told you that you look like Ray Romano? Someone's going to say that, so I'll cut that off in the past and say, yes, I've heard that. Another subset of people will come back and say, I didn't actually think that, but I saw this hilarious movie with this dude who's constantly smoking pot called Harold and Kumar Goes to White Castle. You kind of look like him. I've heard that one as well. So if you have questions other than that, feel free to grab me. I'll be here all day. Thanks.